let me just start the YouTube live. All right, and we're now live also on YouTube. So let's get started. Noam, if you want to talk, it would be also ideal if you can connect on Discord. Okay, so let's start with our 12th community call. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to see that many people connected. We have 129 persons on Discord and about 40 on YouTube, which is pretty cool. And the topic for today, so as you know, usually on our community call, we welcome community members to present their project, talk about what they do on StarkNet, and then often we talk about the roadmap of StarkNet. It would be very cool to talk about the roadmap of StarkNet today because there are a lot of things happening, especially around fees, but we're not going to talk about that today. Today we have Ohad with us, and we want to discuss a topic that is less related to right here, right now, and how you build your applications on StarkNet right this second. And that is more focused on the medium to long term. Whereas today we're talking about an important topic. We're talking about decentralization. So Ohad, I know you prepared a presentation, so I'm just going to activate the screen sharing for you. So you will be able to present, and if you want to see Ohad's slide, you will be able to see them on YouTube. Ohad, if you can also share the link to your slides on Discord, then people who are in Discord and want to show your slide would be great. But yeah, so today we're flying a bit on a higher level than usual, and we're discussing important topics. It's time we have the serious talk. How do we decentralize? And I want to mention that this discussion has started, right? Ohad, you posted a bunch of posts and a bunch of Twitter posts. So you posted a bunch of posts on Discourse, and you posted a bunch of polls on Twitter. And I want to underline that we need your input in this discussion, all of you, whether you're users of StarkNet or deving on StarkNet. We want to have your opinion on what works, what doesn't, what does decentralization mean, and things like that. So we're doing a community call, but don't wait for a community call to get involved. React to these posts, answer these questions. Please voice your opinion. It's very important for the long-term health of the network. And with that presentation, Ohad, the floor is yours.
Hey everyone, you can hear me, right?
I can hear you on Zoom.
Not on Discord, I'm also on the community call.
My Discord seems frozen, so I'm going to restart it.
Yeah. And also, how do I screen share and how do I use the chat? I'm sorry, it's the first time here and I'm a bit excited.
It's all right. So you screen share on Zoom. So you...
Okay, screen sharing on Zoom is easy.
There you go. So you screen share on Zoom, and if you have a link for your...
Yeah, I send it on Slack.
Okay, so I need you to authorize me to speak in the Discord. I just raised my hand. You should be able to say, hey, go ahead and re-speak.
I don't see your requests. Oh, you're here now. You don't need me. You are a big boy.
No. Okay, cool. Before we start, I just want to mention, again, we're going to post the links to the slide in the chat. If you want to ask questions, you can ask them in the YouTube chat and in the community calls channel. I will monitor it and make sure that we answer the questions.
Okay. Can you all see my screen? Can I start?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so it's great to be here. First time in the community call. I'm Ohad. I'm product manager at Starkware. Work a bit with Henry and a bit with other people. And for the last several months, I organized the decentralization research in Starkware, and we had a lot of internal debate and a lot of discussions, not only about how to do it, but also and mainly about what we want to achieve. So this is like the agenda today. We'll explore what we want to have from the decentralization protocol, and most notably why we can't have it all. We want to get a lot of feedback, and I don't know if people are talking in the Discord, but potentially I'd love to have some discussion about what people think that is required and what their opinions are. And then if some time remains, we'll take some potential requirements and see how to build really a decentralization scheme around them. Obviously, all the presentation will refer to 3 posts we have in the Shamans. I invite you all to read, tell me what a bad author I am, and then continue read and ask me questions. So let's get into it. Okay, so first of all, we want to decentralize StarkNet. So this is like a bit big word, but let's discuss about what we for sure want to do. So first of all, we want to decentralize both sequencer and prover, right? If we decentralize the sequencers very well, but have only one prover, or vice versa, it's not really a decentralization. Secondly, provers are always limited to proving transactions that the sequencers agreed on. So we don't want to let provers the ability to reorganize transactions unless they really, really must. And thirdly, this would be like a proof of stake protocol. We don't want proof of work. And number 4, which is not really what we want, but like the scope of the discussion, obviously, in a proof of stake protocol, especially leader-based, we need some randomness to determine who is the sequencer when. For simplicity, we assume that the randomness origin, as well as the randomness, as well as the algorithm based on this randomness is out of scope. We just say, okay, we have a list of sequencers, and this is like a given. Okay, so if I discuss the general layout here, so we have the L2 transaction senders, they'll send transaction to the mempool. We'll have sequencers with a proof of stake BFT protocols that would agree on sequence of blocks and sequence of transactions. Then we'll have provers that would be in charge basically to echo those transactions to the Stark prover, which would submit proofs to the Stark verifier on-chain, as well as updating the StarkNet core contract. So this is like the main division between what sequencer do versus what provers do, and what is the lifespan of a transaction in the network in general. Any questions so far? I tend to be a bit
yes, there is a question. There is a question actually on YouTube. So Ezeki is asking, why do we need to have a decentralized prover? Can't I run a prover on my machine and provide a proof? In other words, do we really need a consensus mechanism? Couldn't we just have a race to whoever publishes a proof as soon as he has one?
Okay, so when we say decentralization mechanism for the prover, we mean that we need more than one prover. If we have 1,000 sequencer and one prover, and the prover say, look, I go home, then
I'm sorry, just Ohad, you're not on Discord anymore.
What happened? I'm in Discord. I'm right here. You see my screen. I'm talking.
You don't appear on my Discord. This is weird. Okay, you know what? Let's proceed. At least you're on YouTube and people can hear you there. So people on Discord, if you can't hear Ohad, jump on YouTube. There's some weird glitch here, some black magic.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my Discord is right here. Shall I leave and rejoin?
I'm not sure if it's just me or if it's everywhere. So people on Discord, can you confirm whether you can hear Ohad or not?
Hello.
All right, let's proceed. We'll see.
Okay, I'll just rejoin the voice channel. Oh, great. Discord, I hate you. I officially hate you.
All right, so you should click on community call here. Cool. And maybe, yeah, become a speaker.
Hello.
Yes, now this works. Okay, now I can hear you.
Great. Was my answer to the question before satisfactory, or shall I expand more on why we want to decentralize provers?
No, I think it was good.
Okay. So let's get back to the presentation. So what is left to decide? So first of all, I ignored here like the two important questions, which is first, how is the chain of blocks being built, right? Say that I'm the sequencer now, and then here's the second one, what Henry is doing with his time slot. And secondly, and this refers to the YouTube question, who are the provers and how are they chosen? Like, if is every sequencer automatically also a prover? Shall we allow several provers to work on proofs for the same thing in parallel? How to decide what, like, from where to where the blocks that each prover proves, etc. So like this high-level description might make sense, but it leaves out the crunch of the design. So let's get to the specific requirements, and this connects really to a Shaman post I had, I think, almost 2 months ago. And if you want to go back to it and add more to the discussions there, please do. But let's repeat it on here. So what we want to be permissionless, meaning that anyone can stake and anyone can participate. And this would allow us to say, okay, anyone can be sequencer or prover, right? This is of course a must, but we also want to have like sufficient de facto decentralization. Like if we say that anyone can join, but the protocol stops to work well when it has above 5 sequencers, it's not really decentralized, right? So here we have the question of what is sufficiently de facto decentralized. I had a Twitter poll around it. It got 11 votes. When I asked, okay, say that we have a proof of stake chain, anyone can join the staking pool, anyone can participate in sequencing, but like, what is the number of sequencers, the factors that you'll feel comfortable with? And as you can see, like 11 votes is not much. If you have any opinions, I'd love to hear them now or later in any platform you'd like. But you can see that even in those 11 votes, it's a bit uniform between people. So we are not really sure what is the requirement and what the target. And as we'll see, if we say, okay, we must have at least 300 sequencers, it has its trade-offs. Like we can obtain it, but it won't come for free. Okay, now is another good point for questions or comments about this poll. Anything?
So yes, just a sec. Yes, there's a question in the YouTube chat where Kartik is asking, it's linked, it's not exactly that, but it says, how many provers do we need? Should it be 10 or do we need 100 plus? How does it impact proving efficiency?
I think that like, okay, so first of all, we indeed have a debate here, right? Whether decentralizing the provers above a minimal number is crucial. As I ask here, what is more decentralized, right? Network with 50 sequencers and 50 provers, or 200 sequencers and 10 provers? And the reason I say it is because by design, provers can't reorder transactions. They can only attest proofs to whatever the sequencers agree on, unless no one submits a proof, and then potentially there are escape hatches to revert the order. So this is why like 1 or 2 provers are not sufficient. And later we'll see, okay, sequencers agree on a bunch of blocks. Then we say, okay, the next prover would prove this bunch of blocks. The next prover after it would prove the next bunch of blocks, and so on and so forth. So we don't expect provers to like work on parallel on the same proof.
Something I wanted to mention also, when you guys are asking, so what is the correct number of provers there? Is it 10, 100, 1,000? I don't think there is a good answer to that. I mean, like, there's no, oh, this is a right answer, a good answer, this is the right answer. It really matters. Like, this is why we're asking your opinion. There's no right or wrong here. There's what the community considers enough. What I mean, this is something new. There's no, like, blockchains in general are relatively new, and what we consider enough, we as a community is enough. So it's important that you guys voice your opinion. What do you think about that? We don't have a better answer than you do.
Any more questions? Shall I move on? You're the YouTube guy.
So there's a question on YouTube saying, can we run the sequencer locally for low latency RPC call? That's more related to a full node, but I think there's a there's a broader question here of what it means to be a node in StarkNet, like if you're just verifying the proof or if you're also collecting transactions, aggregating them, and sequencing them. So, but that I think you presented it a bit earlier, like what are the different roles,
Yeah,
right?
so the sequencers get transactions from the mempool. You can view them as like, they're somewhat equivalent to miners on Ethereum, right? They are the generators of new block. Obviously, anyone even now can have full node without being able to add more blocks to StarkNet.
What sort of hardware would be required to run a sequencer? Probably big.
So I think it's too early to commit to specific hardware, obviously. I imagine though that the hardware requirements eventually would be non-trivial, just because we want to build a very fast network. And the magic of validity rollups is that unlike say Ethereum or Solana or any other blockchain really, here you can say, okay, I have 10, 20, 100 sequencers with supercomputers and crazy machines, but still I can verify the proofs on the Raspberry Pi and make sure that everything was like a well executed. So if we say that the sequencers are Raspberry Pi, we give up the biggest leverage we have here. So expect sequencer hardware to be non-trivial.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In a way, what validity rollups allow you to do is to do with execution what is done on proof of work networks with security. You delegate it to specialized actors, or that any actor can join, this cohort of specialized actor. But as a simple validator in the network, you don't need to don't need to run all the security of Bitcoin. You can just verify that it's correct. Here, you'll be able not to compute all the execution, but verify that it is correct. It seems like, just like you don't want to say in a proof of work network, hey, here's the maximum amount of hashes we want to be able to process at a given time. You want this to be flexible so that the more security people are willing to pay for, the more security the network has. It's the same thing here. The more capacity people are willing to pay for the network to handle, we want the network to be able to accommodate for this. So there's no way to limit this. But to go back to the specific point, so it means that running a sequencer and a prover will probably be something that is similar to what mining is today. So it's going to be a specialized endeavor that's going to be relatively expensive and require specific machines.
Henry, I stopped hearing you double, so one of us is not on Discord anymore.
It looks like I'm still on Discord. You're not on Discord anymore.
Great.
Oh my. Okay, people on Discord, if you don't hear Ohad anymore, you should join the YouTube link. It's gonna be way easier. Okay, I'm gonna take a look if there are some questions in the community call channel. There's none. Okay, so we can go on if you want.
Yeah, I'll log into the StarkNet. Okay, I'm back to the Discord. I hate this code. I'm sorry. Okay, so the next requirement we want to have is fast L2 finality. And before I say what is this requirement, we need to understand what L2 finality means. So let's go back to the life of the transaction. This is like a bit different slide to highlight a bit different point, but it's essentially equivalent to the slide we saw before. So user sends a transaction, it's get to a sequencer, I decide to include it in the stream, it gets to StarkNet, it changes the state, then we wait for more transactions. After waited for more transactions, there is a proof. The proof is submitted, state updates happens, and like transaction is considered fully final only after step 5, only after we waited for more transactions and we proved they're working together and we updated the state. And this might take several hours. Now, several hours is obviously much better than like optimistic rollup, for example, but it's not an acceptable time frame for a lot of applications, right? The system would be totally unusable if you say to you, okay, you want to withdraw, you must wait 5 hours, and there is no way around that. So what L2 finality means is that we want to have some guarantee. Obviously, it would be lower than a full finality, but we want to have some guarantee, say optimistically, even after the first block with our transaction in it got approved, that our transaction will get there, meaning that unless something really unexpected happens, indeed in a few hours, it would for sure be final on L1, right? We need it for like interoperability, for fast withdrawals, even with time-sensitive issues like voting, for example, right? If the voting closes 2 hours from now, I want to be sure that my vote is included, because otherwise the sequencer can trick me, pull the transaction out of there, and when it would get to L1, I would see that my transaction isn't there. So like some sense of L2 finality is without a doubt important. And here we have another debate, like is having 1 second finality, is that much better than having like 20 seconds or even 1 minute finality? Obviously it can't be a few hours, but like what's the trade-off there? Any questions so far?
I'm monitoring.
Okay, I'll move on in the meantime. The next requirement is that it's inexpensive, and inexpensive here meaning regarding L1 usage, right? So like StarkNet is not in the air, it's built over Ethereum, and we can use Ethereum as some kind of like public board. For example, you could imagine a protocol when each sequencer commits on L1 to the hash of the new block, or even to the transaction it included in his block, right? And then, okay, it's in Ethereum, it can't be reverted. But if I'm as a sequencer transmit to L1 the data of all the transactions I'm going to include, obviously, this is like crippling. We lose a lot of StarkNet potential because we overuse L1 and we cause a lot of overhead and a lot of gas cost to the sequencers. So we would like to be as modest as we can with respect to our transactions that appear on L1 as part of the protocol. Okay. Next requirement is to be lightweight. What I mean by lightweight, it's close to inexpensive, but it's a different perspective. So by lightweight, I mean, okay, we have StarkNet. Let's assume the current state, StarkNet is decentralized. We have no decentralization. And all the Starkware sequencer is doing is to process Starkware transactions. Now, obviously, when we will add the protocol to decentralized, it would have some kind of consensus, right? We'll have to prove that everything behaves according to the consensus. So some kind of inefficiency will appear due to this decentralization. This is inherent, but we want to keep it to a minimal amount as possible. Like, for example, if you look on Solana, much more than 50% of the transactions they have is around the consensus. So what happens? I build this network that can contain, say, 2,000, 3,000 TPS, but the factoid includes only, say, 400 or 300 TPS of real applications, and the rest is dedicated to the consensus. So obviously, the less room we leave for like the real applications, the more expensive sending a transaction on StarkNet becomes. So far, so good?
Yes, so far so good.
Okay.
So Bartek is asking, what if the sequencer commits to a transaction, but the prover cannot prove the transaction and it has to be excluded? How do you how do you how do you provide an escape hatch for that?
Okay. So this kind of disaster is handled on two levels. First of all, there is some consensus mechanism on L2, as we'll see. Other sequencers should either provide signature to your block, like signature-based BFT, or they build on top of your block, like longest chain BFT. Obviously, if sequencers see that your block is shit, they wouldn't provide signatures, or they wouldn't build on it. So it wouldn't get included in what the prover is going to prove. So this is like
it would already mean that this is a consensus attack on StarkNet's, that somehow consensus failed because the sequencers decided to include a bad transaction.
Yeah. So first of all, this is obviously doesn't say it won't happen. It just means that the attacker needs like 51% stake in order to execute this attack. But obviously, if the sequencer commits to a bad transaction, the prover would try to prove it because this is the protocol, and then the prover wouldn't prove it. And then we'll say, okay, the prover didn't prove it. We'll have some mechanism to gradually open the opportunity for more and more provers to participate. And this is like low level points that we debate internally exactly if and what intermediary steps would be. But at the end of the road, we'll say, okay, all the provers, this is last call, prove it. If one of them manages to do it, we say, okay, we heavily slash all the provers that didn't participate in the game so far. If none of the provers know how to prove a transaction, then we heavily slash all the sequencers that were involved in this kind of attack, so it won't repeat, and the state would indeed revert. Because in the end, we rely on security of being able to prove and not on the consensus for the correctness. But having a finality on L2 means, okay, you are open to a disaster where like 51% of the stake cooperates to exclude your transaction. But in order to do so, 51% of the stake in the system will get slashed, right? So it's still high level of finality in reality.
Thank you. There is another question. So one I think is so the question up, let me read it exactly. Is there some research paper talking about POS, proof of stake, in a rollup, or is it exactly the same as on Ethereum? I think here the broader question is, do we need some kind of specific proof of stake algorithm, or can we take something off the shelf? Could we reuse?
So indeed, we can take something out of the shelf, and one of our suggestions is Tendermint based. But taking something out of the shelf would never be enough, because decentralization for ZK rollup is unique in the sense that you have this extra role of provers, and the security comes from it. This is like refers to requirement 6 as secure as Ethereum. It means that like even if you have 51% stake attack on the network, in a regular network like Cosmos, you say, okay, the security assumption is that such an attack wouldn't happen. StarkNet is an L2, so we say, okay, those transactions might happen. And if this is the case, we can't allow the attackers to do whatever they want. We need to have escape hatches. We need to handle it in the provers level. But we also need to make sure that like if you have a sequencer that claims that the prover didn't prove the claim, and the prover that claims, yeah, right, but the sequencer claim can be proven, that we sort it out in a sensible way. One way is to say, okay, any prover can now try to prove it. And assuming we have enough provers, it's good enough.
Cool, thank you. There was an earlier question also. Are there plans to keep the sequencer fairly decentralized? For example, with something like Rocket Pool or Lido, or will you let the market decide? I think maybe, I'm not sure that's exactly that, but there are some, delegated staking services where people can delegate their stake to have it stake to have somebody else stake it for them. Is it something that we can imagine? I mean, if it's proof of stake based, to take turns in the in the in being a prover or a sequencer, can we imagine a smaller player taking parts of these without setting up a huge infrastructure?
Sorry, say again.
So, say today, for trying to, like, for example, when you're a miner on Ethereum, it doesn't make sense to solo mine. You join a mining pool.
Yeah,
If you want to
we'll
stake,
have stake delegation, I guess.
okay.
And like we just mine the sequencers, but the assumption is that every sequencer has a lot of stake from many individual persons that delegated stake to it.
Okay, cool. And then there's another question. On what basis sequencer pick a transaction from mempool?
So we like currently there are no restrictions. We just thinking about how to handle consensus, namely how you can be sure that this transaction will get included if the sequencers tell you that it will get included. We are thinking about MEV, obviously. I guess this is what this question refers to. But those kind of thoughts, like if you have any ideas, we would love to see and hear your thoughts, but internally they are not yet concise enough to present them like this. It's only research in its beginning.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, so the next point that I want to have, like we have all those great requirements. The pain point is that we can't have it all. It's sort of like choose two between having very fast and very strong finality, being lightweight, and have tons of active sequencers. And why is that? So let's say we have very fast and strong finality. Very fast and strong finality connects to, okay, we have block times of a few seconds. So very fast means, okay, after one block, we know for sure that this transaction would be there. We can't allow to have, say, longest chain based block. When you say, okay, even if this block is accepted, maybe some other chain would get to be the longest. So very fast means that one block includes attestations from all the sequencers to agree that they agree to this block, and if this block gets reversed, they are slashed, etc., etc. This is like what very fast and strong finality means when you come to implement it, as far as I know. And then if you say, okay, I have a protocol that requires each sequencer to get attestations from other sequencers, it means that either you don't have that many sequencers, at least not sequencers that are active in the same time, right? We can say, okay, each day we sample 30 sequencers. But if I'm the sequencers need to attest signatures from like 1,000 other sequencers in like a convoluted protocol with superlinear communication complexity, it wouldn't be extremely lightweight, right? And if I say, okay, I want signature-based or like attestation-based finality, and I want to be extremely lightweight, it just wouldn't work with 500 sequencers. So like this is how we see it in terms of requirement. Obviously, we don't need to sacrifice completely anything here. Even if we say, okay, very fast and very strong can mean wait 2 minutes, then it can work, right? If we say, okay, 30 sequencers are enough, it can work. If we say, okay, we allow the network, the protocol to take, I say, 20, 30% of StarkNet capacity, it can work. So we don't need to totally kill one of those requirements, but we'll have to settle on something. This is at least how we view it. But we are far from being the world experts in staking and like consensus protocols. So if you see an error in this argument, please tell me. And assuming there is no error, I had another Twitter poll with a lot more votes. So I guess many of you actually participated. And if that's the case, thank you. And I asked basically what is the most important. The real agenda was to see which option get the least amount of votes. And this is the option that I would say to myself, okay, maybe we can try to think on sacrificing it. But I doubt that the poll readers like understood the full context that you now have. So I think this is another great point to like stop for questions and comments.
Let me check. So, okay, Discord definitely stopped working. I can't get any feedback. I can't even access the chat, so I don't know what to do. I do see the questions on YouTube, so keep them coming there. If you have questions in the audience, please let us know. In the meanwhile, Ohad, I have a question for you. You mentioned you had these polls. So here we can see your handle. What can we do what can the community do to give you more feedback, to give more feedback about the decentralization discussion? Should it be voting on Twitter? Should it be interacting on posts? How can the community get more involved in this
Yeah,
discussion?
so like polls on Twitter are not like the universal tools of the world, right? It's just to make people more aware. It's not how we expect to have a really deep dive discussion. So first of all, we did have this wrong direction, a lot of spoilers. This first post here, which basically says what I said so far. It explains the requirements. It says why we can't have it all, and it's like it begs for feedback, for discussion about more aspects. So far, it received one short yet very appreciated feedback of like, what about MEV as an 8 requirement? But if you have any kind of like prioritization between those requirements, or you have some new way of thinking to explain how we can achieve all of those requirements combined, I think comment on the shaman thread would be the most efficient thing to do. Also feel free to DM me, but then other people wouldn't see your awesomeness.
Very cool. So okay, so DSI is asking, what do we mean by decentralization in a rollup? Whatever a sequencer does, it can't corrupt the state, right? So I think here the question is like, why do we even need to decentralize StarkNet? Like,
Yeah.
is it necessary?
I agree that the correctness of all the transactions come first and foremost from the proofs, and like even being with one sequencer wouldn't allow like the one sequencer to run anything invalid. But like for real economical use cases, it's highly important that no transaction is being censored. For example, let's say I have an economical system and it's valid, all the transactions there are valid, but it has some kind of like lending market or perpetual trading or any other kind of market. And there are no Oracle updates. Why? Because the one sequencer there decided that Oracle prices is a bad thing and they want to freeze the asset prices there forever, right? So this kind of system, even if all the correctness is proved, obviously wouldn't make sense. And as long as you have centralized system, even if it's in ZK rollup, you must trust the sequencer to some degree. I agree it's much less trust than on Ethereum. And personally, I also think that this is the reason why we can say, okay, 30 or 50 sequencers are enough for StarkNet. Well, maybe for L1, I would say we need more than that. But those are gray areas. Like this is for the community to decide.
Perfect. Thank you. And there are no other questions.
Okay, so if that's the status, we can get to the second part of the talk, which refers to the other two posts we posted in the shamans, which is like getting into gist of concrete suggestions to how to actually decentralize. So if I want to look on the decisions from high level, we have sort of like two main and somewhat independent decisions. One decision is if we go with signature-based L2 consensus, like Tendermint. If you have other candidates out there that you think would be more fit than Tendermint, we would love that to hear about them. We chose Tendermint not because we extremely appreciate its theoretical efficiency, but because we know Cosmos uses it. So we say, okay, there is some stack we can use. Maybe we've create other proof of stake protocols that we can use. We are not like biased towards Tendermint anyway. And or we want to have some longest chain based L2 consensus, meaning that like each sequencer chooses a value like a chains of previous blocks he wants to prolong. And this means that there are some trade-offs, right? Even if the sequencer really generated a block with your transactions, maybe it wouldn't get prolonged by other sequencers and it would get abandoned. So this is like the first decision. And the second decision is being a prover a must for a sequencer? Like, is the protocol forces each sequencer to also participate in the proving phase? Or do we say, okay, we have this L2 consensus, it continues to generate blocks, and whenever a prover wants to prove what has been done so far, it can say, look, I'm volunteering to do this job. Obviously, it's not volunteer. The protocol needs to make sure it's compensated. But like, we say, okay, it's okay to be a sequencer without being a prover. So those two questions are totally independent, and the results can be mixed and matched. Just to show you the two most far alternatives, we took one combination, which is signature-based with forcing each sequencer to be the prover, and we posted them on shamans. And we took also another one, which is longest chain plus volunteering proving. Makes sense so far?
It does. It's kind of like trying to mix Pokemons. It's fun. You
Yeah.
take attributes and you see what comes out. I have a question. So you're saying that the question is whether we want people to be able to be sequencers but not provers, or is the role basically bundled? Is there a downside to also being a prover when you're a sequencer? It sounds to me like being a sequencer would require a lot of hardware equipment, like a high hardware requirement. Proving also requires this, but I mean, once you've gone all the way to having a sequencer, how much bigger of an overhead is it to run a prover?
So if we say, okay, sequencers would run all the transactions sequentially, then actually being prover is overhead, because proving a computation is also always more complex than just run it. But this line of thinking is a bit naive, because when we talked with like Flashbots, the first thing they said, okay, sequencers wouldn't just be able to barely keep up with sequential executing. They'll have to like parallelize and be those supercomputers that check the best MEV options. And if you factor that, then proving is a lightweight job compared to it. I think that the most not appealing aspect of being a prover is that you are exposed to slashing. So say that you are the hero that volunteered to prove transactions between 10 and 11 a.m. And the protocol expects you to submit a proof by, say, 2 p.m. And then on 1:30 p.m., just before you're about to finish, you had an like electricity failure and your computer was shut down, and now you wouldn't be able to submit the proof in time. So obviously the protocol wouldn't be satisfied. You'd probably slash a bit from it.
Couldn't you run a proof that you ran a proof up until 80%?
No, proof is like either you do it or you don't. So obviously being a prover is like, it has more risks than being a sequencer, right? Because if the same thing would happen to you and you're only the sequencer, so worst case scenario, you lost potential block rewards if you were the proposer, or like nothing really major happened if you weren't the proposer. But if you're the prover and it happens to you, you're exposed to slashing.
Cool, thank you. And now it's a bit of more general question, but there's a lot of questions floating around, like how intensive it is to run a prover. And I guess for a network like StarkNet or StarkX, we're talking about big base loads, so this requires a lot of proving time. But my question is basically the following. Once we have the capacity to verify a proof inside another proof, how crazy is it to imagine that I do a single transaction and I use rollups? I mean, I use ZK proofs, not necessarily for scalability, but also for privacy, for example. How crazy and how far-fetched is it to imagine that I generate a proof on my cell phone for a single transaction?
Yeah, generating a proof on your cell phone for a single transaction is very feasible, I think. And maybe it would take the smartphone a couple of minutes to do it, but I don't think it's that hard problem. Obviously, to be 100% sure, it's better to ask the engineering here at Starkware. I never tried to do it, but I guess it's not that hard. The real issue is proving transactions one by one, even when you have this recursive proving, is that in the end, if you look back at the flow of transactions, maybe you save a lot in step 4, but in the end of the day, when you update the state in step 5, you pay here a transaction for every like underlying proof. So like the 5 million cost of the proof can be shared and like composed between how many proofs you want. But in the end, each proof is like a proof for a state update, and this state update wouldn't be split, I think.
Or unless you have everyone do their proof separately, and then you aggregate them into a proof, and this proof is the state of that. Anyway,
yeah,
then you can think about a lot of different
you
stuff.
You can do a lot of things.
But my question, I guess, was more, and you answered it, was more like, is proving necessarily something where you need a supercomputer to run for hours? The answer is no. There's a wide spectrum here, and you can imagine proving stuff on your cell phone.
The prover de facto to be not more stronger than the sequencer. I think it's just about the risks and not about the hardware you need.
Interesting, thank you.
Any more questions before like a deep dive into like the summary of those two suggestions?
No, Olgu is saying shalom, but that's about it.
Okay, so let's start with longest chain and volunteer proving. Everything is documented to like in very detail in the shamans. So what happens here? Each sequencer can offer a new block on top of some other block. And sequencers ideally should build on top of existing longest chains that they know how to prove. So blocks are accumulating on L2 according to this. This is, for example, like 6 sequencers, I'm sorry, each had a different time slot, so you can see how chain can be built. It has very, very low overhead, right? Because there is no consensus rules beyond enforcing that each one proposed the block at the time he should have proposed a block. So it can be lightweight with many sequencers, but we lose on the fast finality, right? Because even if sequencer number 3 told me, here is the block, I include your transaction, and in the end it's not in the winning chain, it gives me nothing. So I need to wait several blocks before I can be even somewhat sure that my transaction would get in there. And now what happens? So, okay, this is how blocks are accumulating on L2, and then comes the prover, the heroic prover that says, okay, we have here some blocks that accumulated since the last proof, 1, 2, and 4, okay? I'm sorry, there is like, it's obviously 1, 2, and 4, not 1, 3, and 4. And he says, okay, I'll prove blocks 1, 2, and 4, but if all he would do is to prove 1, 2, and 4, he would have a problem, right? Because maybe block number 4 is malicious, right? The network still didn't build on it. The other sequencers didn't agree, and now it's already in L1, like in the committed state to be proven. So in addition to that, he would prove, okay, I know some blocks, say 5 and 6, that agree with block number 4. Why they agree with block number 4? Because those sequencers chose to continue. So like block 4 indeed reflects some kind of a wide consensus between the sequencers. Obviously, the constants would be much more than 3 blocks to prove and 2 blocks to see that they're like aggregated after it. But this is just to shrink it all to one slide. So he sent a commitment to L1 saying like, this is the block I'm going to prove, this is the status. And now all the sequencers telling to themselves, okay, he would probably prove this block. We will build on top of block number 4. As they can commit to like the next proof in the chain before this one finishes its job. They don't like wait for the proof to end before they commit to a new stuff on L1. So if I look on how the state of a first look from the L1 perspective, so let's say we start with like state A is being proven. State A is say what happened here before block 1. And then I commit to a state B. Let's say state B is the state at the end of block 4 here. So I send my commitment to the L1 contract. Now the L1 contract awaits to the proof of state B. And then Henry continued, like L2 continues to build on top of me. Henry say arrives to block 10 and he tells to L1, okay, I want to prove block 10. So now the network in the state is like, okay, state A is proven and states B and C are committed. Now, let's say that the proof to B arrives fast, meaning I committed to block 4, I prove B 4, no problem, the state is updated. It remembers that like B is proven and C is committed. Let's say that I didn't send the proof to block 4, no problem. Anyone can do it some constant time after me. And if they do it, the L1 contract would infer that, okay, state like block 4 is indeed valid and someone proved it, but Ohad was malicious. Ohad didn't prove in time. So I'll slash Ohad and I'll move forward with my life. And the worst case, the escape hatch that Bartek referred to earlier, is what happened like a lot of time passes and the provers are silent. No proof never arrives. So now the contract would say, okay, it's been like 2 days, or I don't know, any other concept we'll come up with. No one proved block B. I infer that like block B is malicious. I go back to state A is proven. I'll heavily slash Ohad and Henry that's promised like to build something on top of B. And crucially notice that all what it do really is causing latency from L2 to L1, because if somehow Henry and myself had like 51% attack, and we caused this issue to happen, the rest 49% knows that it's invalid. They can continue to build on L2. They can continue to update the state. It just isn't committed to L1. And at the end of the day, after this time period happens, everything will just say, okay, prove, and we'll fastly update L1 to catch up with what happened in L2 in this state. So the power of the provers here is very limited by design. And I talked too much. I'll stop now.
It's all right. Perfect. Thank you, Ohad. I actually missed a question before. Kartik asked, can the sequencers be slashed as well if they don't include a transaction?
So according to this vanilla version of the protocol, nothing enforces sequencers to include transactions. And according to this design, they even don't sign on anything. So like the only confirmations that you have that the transaction is included is that you have like some full node. You see, okay, Ohad indeed included this transaction. Indeed, many sequencers built on top of Ohad. So now you have got like some kind of assurance. It's somewhat slow and somewhat weak, but you have some kind of insurance that this transaction would get there.
It sounds like being a sequencer, you have to have a big machine, but there's not a lot of constraints.
I mean, that's the case also in Ethereum.
You mean to run a node?
To run a miner, yes.
To run a miner, yes, you're right. To run a miner, but to run like a staking node, it's a bit different. You have to have some kind of warranties.
I mean, in this design, if you don't propose a block, for example, or you propose a block that it's invalid, you just don't receive anything on your money, right? Because you get compensated, and like the transactions are final only when this block is actually included, right, in a proof. So if you did a bad job, you are not earning anything from your stake.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ohad. Let me see if there are other questions on YouTube. No question related to the discussion right now.
Okay, so let's look on like the other conjunction of decision, which is like first we want signature-based protocol and we want every sequencer to be a prover. So what happens here? Sequencers agree between themselves on transactions ordering via signature-based consensus. Again, Tendermint is just to show that such things have been done outside. Maybe there are better protocols to do that are not Tendermint. And sequencers need to provide signatures on block only if they show they'll know how to prove them. And how we enforce it? We enforce it because we say, okay, it says that like Henry, myself, and Bartek, our questions asker, are the sequencers. We had some signatures. All the three of us provided signatures for a block, and now it's like above 2/3 of the stake. So this block enters to the chain. In 10 minutes, 20 minutes, hour, some new fresh randomness will determine which one for me, for myself, Henry, and Bartek will be the prover for this block and potentially this block and some blocks that came before it. So really, when we generate signature of the proof, we know that there is a chance proportional to our stake that the protocol will tell us, you are the prover, congratulations. So this is like another type of protocol. It has very fast finality, right? Because after one block, you see that the block is there, you see the transaction is in the block, you see the signatures. So you know, okay, if now there is any kind of reordering, a third of the stake is slashed. So it's very fast and very strong finality. But when you try to do it with many sequencers, it wouldn't be lightweight. So we have to compromise on one of the other aspects. And if I like say, okay, we have this consensus and we have the provers and that's it, we actually turn into a liveness problem. Because what you do if like half of the stake suddenly disappearing. In the previous suggestion, it wasn't a problem, right? Because we say, okay, even if half of the stake is disappearing, the network would advance 2 times slower. And long term, the participants would get more stake and be able to increase their percentages and will be all right. On L1 Cosmos, for example, it's not an issue because they just assume it wouldn't happen, right? Consensus is their security assumption. They have some kind of slashing in case stake is leaving the system slowly. But if like in one instant, half of the stake goes down, they're stuck. And we want to keep alive, right? We want to be able to be alive, even if someone executed the 51% attack and then he shut down all of his computers. So this edge case, which isn't really bothering us in the previous suggestion, suddenly cripples the entire design here. So one potential solution for it, and I say potential with like asterisk, 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 because this is something I came up with. Like everything you've seen here is like a lot of debates and discussions inside Starkware. It's somewhat mature. This is like, okay, I have this problem. I need to solve it for the post. I have a day. So I came up with this. But potentially there are other alternatives. So what happened is that I say, okay, how we can do it? We can do it in the following sense. The longer pass time between like proof submissions and like attestation that someone is going to submit a proof, the less stake would be required from the L2 in order to agree on what to advance the state. So like in the happy flow, the stake is alive. You require 2/3 of the entire stake on each block. But if, for example, it's been 3 days and no one submitted the state update, then we start to suspect, okay, something is really, really messed up with the L2 sequencers. Now, for example, 60% would be enough. And all the rest are slashed. Potentially even those that did participate are slashed a bit to just prevent them from delaying the proof according to their choice. This is like a very extreme solution to this problem. I'm sure that potentially there is a better one. Again, I invite you warmly to participate in discussions on how to solve it in a better way. Yeah, that's all the material I had, but I'd love to have questions, comments. Kel says.
Yes, there are 2 questions. So one is Donovan asking, when we say not lightweight in your previous slide, I think, does it mean compared to Ethereum or Solana? And I think
It means
it's
like
more
what percentage of the network capacity is dedicated to prove the consensus. Right?
okay.
Obviously,
So it's not related to hardware requirement to be a sequencer. It means that it will take up a large bandwidth of the network capacity just for the network to be able to maintain itself.
Yeah, let's say that like each block of StarkNet has like 100 million Cairo steps. And some part of the block correctness is not only the transaction correctness, but also proving that this block was indeed produced by the protocol consensus we agree on. So would it be like 500,000 or 20 million out of those 100 million Cairo steps?
Which would change the equation quite a bit. And then Henri Berger is asking, what will be the incentive to run a sequencer or a prover since it requires a non-basic hardware spec? So
obviously, if you participate in the protocol, you are staking some token, you have rewards. So Yeah, like maybe we'll have like a block reward like Ethereum. Maybe it would only be fee from transactions, but it would be very similar to Ethereum in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, if some people commit some hardware to basically run the network and people pay a fee, I mean, there's some place where it works, right? Where people pay enough fee to cover the cost of running the network. So even just the fee should work.
Yeah, maybe. Like we work with some economics expert to see exactly how to build some things that make sense from economical perspective. For example, if we decouple sequencers and provers, there is another interesting question, right? Maybe there is a transaction that pay a lot of fees, so the sequencer would like to include it, but it's also very heavy on the prover because, for example, it has like 100 L2 to L1 messages that the prover would need to pay the gas for. So we need to make sure the transaction is included only if it makes sense for like the entire system to have it, and not to accept transactions that sequencer says, okay, I'd gladly accept it because I'm not a prover, and then the prover would get fucked.
That's interesting. That's that's really interesting. I like the fact that we can reuse some part of what was invented before in the blockchain space, and for others, it's just a new paradigm. It's new roles, new tasks, and things like that. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Let me check. And okay. Does Starkware plan to take a person from the fees of StarkNet? Will they just benefit from running their own prover sequencer? I would say to that question that right now we run the network and we don't make money from it. Running the network is actually a cost to us because there's no fee and it will remain a cost for some time. And
Even when we will have a fee next month, we'll just take the minimal amount that
exactly
for operating the system.
we're mostly implementing the fees right now so that fees are there, but making it profitable to run sequencer is not right now the objective. And as for what is the role of Starkware in the long-term future of StarkNet, I mean, you can see Starkware as some kind of scaffolding for the network. We're here to get it up and running. We'll obviously be involved in the development, but the network will be fully decentralized. So don't I don't know. I think there are futures where Starkware for sure doesn't take a percentage of the fee of the network, and once the network is decentralized, I mean, will it be Starkware's decision? Probably not.
Yeah. Elon Musk could buy 9.2% of StarkNet.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. I hope that answers the question. Um, and there are no other questions on YouTube for now. And Discord definitely stopped working.
Yeah, I gave up on it a while ago.
All right. I don't know if you have other slides or if
No?
that's very cool. Okay, so there were a couple of somehow not unrelated question, but a bit different question that I want to tackle. I'm happy if you stay around for 2 more minutes to correct me if I say something stupid, and then we can close the community call. So in the beginning of the call, and DSI was asking, I was wondering, does the verifier and StarkNet core contract communicate together? And later he said, what are the differences between the verifier and the StarkNet core contract? I thought the verifier was a immutable smart contract on Ethereum, but it seems that it's not. So basically,
Both are.
a verifier, yeah.
Yeah, like the verifier is what verifies the proofs. And StarkNet contract is like, it uses the verifier. For example, the verifier verifies proofs generated by the sharp. It could also verify StarkX proofs. StarkNet core contract manages the state of StarkNet. Obviously, to update the state, it asks the verifier if this state update is justified. But it also, for example, manages a repository of pending and L1 to L2 messages that weren't yet consumed by L2, or L2 to L1 messages that weren't yet consumed by L1. So it does like the applicative level to connect all the dots there.
And also when we say the verifier, like there is a verifier on Ethereum, but the proof being mathematical can be verified by anything really. I mean, we use a verifier, which is a smart contract on Ethereum, but it can be verified by a node locally. It can be verified by any kind of other program that is programmed to verify this proof. So yeah, I think I don't have anything to add on your explanation. Thank you. Okay, so look, thank you a lot for your time, Ohad. Thank you a lot for the discussion. I want to state again that this discussion is very much opened and we need your input. Your opinions are welcomed and necessary, so don't hesitate and comment and get involved in the forum. And we have one last question. Since the network will work in proof of stake, how will you ensure a decentralized distribution of nodes and token? I'm not sure I understand the question. If it's proof of stake, how do we make sure the stake is decentralized, basically?
I think that, yeah, this comes from, like, obviously if being sequencer would be profitable, then more than one people would like to be a sequencer. And if you have a case where anyone can participate in a proof of stake, but only Henry does, then I guess it's not that profitable, and Henry is like, I don't know the English word for it, but he's losing his money. So
yeah, but that's a good question, which remains open. And if you have good suggestions for it, don't hesitate and comment on the forum. All right, let's wrap it up. Thanks again, Ohad, for your time, and thank you everyone who stayed up until this time to listen to our call. We'll have the following community call in 2 weeks. It's probably going to be a bit chaotic because we have a hackathon in Amsterdam right after DevConnect in 2 weeks. So I think it's going to be a pretty short call of me going around the hackathon and asking questions to teams and having people say hello on camera. But it's going to be fun. And then we'll have a more regular community call in 4 weeks. If you have a project that you want to present, don't hesitate and reach out. We'll be happy to have you. And that settles it for me. Thank you for your time and enjoy your day. Bye.
bye.